Hey everyone, this is Ryan Omega from Life Action Roleplay. A couple of notes for this particular podcast. This was originally recorded in December 2021, and at the time, Kai, Sin, and I were not able to really record a few months before because we were all going through some things personally. And that inspired this particular topic dealing with loss, where we were dealing with personal losses, but also expanded that to how to deal with loss and cope with loss in the LARP world. On one note that is important to know, I was not aware that my own mic was a little soft, and I decided at the time to record without telling my co-hosts that we were recording, just so that you all got the opportunity to listen to our banter before we started the show. And that is pretty much what Sin, Kai, and I are like, just being ourselves. So if that's something you want to hear, let us know. Especially let us know if you are one of our Patreon supporters. And again, if you are a Patreon supporter, thank you so much for supporting us, especially during this time of lockdown. And Patreon support only starts at $1. If you want to contribute more, that's great. But I thought it was a great place for us to share our behind the scenes. And if you want to find us there, it's patreon.com/lifeactionroleplay. And now to our episode.
Who pronounces it different ways, because there's the El Cajones and the El Cajons.
No!
That's great.
No!
Yeah, absolutely. That is totally a thing. It's also like, I can't remember if it's part of or if it shares, or I can't remember if the gay district in San Diego
Hillcrest
shares space with, I know the El Cajon has shares borders with it at least, so Hillcrest is bordering with El Cajon at the very least.
I have a good one for your San Francisco person here.
Okay.
What's the transit thing called?
Bart?
Most people who are not from San Francisco will call it the BART.
The BART?
The
what
Bart.
should it be? Like Bart Simpson?
Yeah.
Oh!
Because if you want to call it, like, you're saying that I'm getting on the bus or I'm getting on the subway.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's not necessarily called either one of those, it's BART because it's an acronym for your guys' transit authority out there.
Yeah.
But people want to attach...
Not much of an authority, really.
You know.
I mean, Bart actually is pretty good in that area. So having lived there and taken the BART, it goes very, very far. So it enables people to do long commutes and not live in San Francisco, which is stupid expensive right now.
Oh yeah, no, it's good for American level of public transit, but I come from another place in the world that has a little more infrastructure on that.
Oh, for sure. Like Europe is better at that.
Oh yeah.
In that regard. Let's see. So we got into a little bit of chatting, but that's because we haven't seen each other for a while, and this is kind of like this is what we do when we're not on stream. But I kind of just enjoy we're just chatting about things. But does anybody have any shout-outs that you want to give? Oh, okay, Sin, go for it.
I do. I have shout-outs to all the December babies because we're the forgotten birthdays. So anybody who has a birthday in December, happy frickin' birthday. You don't share it with Christmas or any other holiday. Happy birthday to y'all.
Happy birthday. Oh, it sounds like I sound like I'm in a long haul. Okay, good to know. Let me see if I can change.
That's interesting. You sound good to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit here and eat my mashed potatoes.
Yeah. I have noticed stuff like that when I listen to recordings. I sound fine, and then just for whatever reason. So I'm going to adjust things, and I think I could probably adjust it to that. Okay, so you probably did not hear a difference. Sin? Oh, sorry, say words. Oh, wow. Hold on. Let me try. Oh, goodness. Did I screw up things? Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, now I can hear you. Like, there was some adjustment that I had to do via Zoom.
I should have said a lot
Yeah,
of
I can hear both
expletives.
of you now. It is working.
Oh, okay. Now, if you can hear. So, part of the reason for those tech issues is because if I'm by myself, there's literally no way for me to find out that something is wrong unless someone in chat tells me, because I cannot check myself, unfortunately. So that is so
It do be that way,
yeah. So it
as
do be that
as
way.
the kids say.
Yes.
I also didn't realize that running a show and also doing the tech is actually difficult. Like no one told me that. I thought that was the default. And people said, no,
Yes.
that's the real reason why you have someone that's separate. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
I
So
didn't.
shout out to all the techs.
Yeah, shout out to all the techs.
Ticks are amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, back to us, December baby. We get lost often in the crowd in the sea of holidays and people leaving and forgetting that people have birthdays too. So happy birthday to all the December babies. Mine was on Tuesday. I'm another year freaking older. Yay.
Kai, any shout outs?
I do. My shout out is to a group that I've had a shout out before in the past, but I cannot overstate how more appropriate it is now more than ever to kind of shout out for the NorCal kids of Dystopia Rising. I will expand upon why, very likely during our episode, but they are incredible for many reasons, and yeah, I'm very, very grateful to have them around.
Let me see. My shout out is actually to one particular person, kind of wishing her congratulations. Her name is Eros Armstrong, and she is one of my playtesters for the Dungeons the Masquerade, a concept that I'm working on right now. But what's amazing is she was highly recommended to just come roleplay, so I thought, just come into the playtest. But had no clue that this was a black woman who is a sumo wrestler
Oh,
who is on
that's badass.
the U.S. national team
Hell yeah.
and is also a veteran. So I'm like, whoa, how are you all these things? And also an amazing role player. And I'm like, I guess there's going to be someone who I'm going to try to draft onto roleplay here at some point, because you are all sorts of amazing. And just watching her sumo wrestle, I was like, I actually screamed when she won her match.
Hell yeah. Did she have a match more recently, or were you watching a recording?
It was recording. She went to Vegas, I think within the last week, to do her for the championship.
Cool.
And she now represents the national team. I mean, she has done so in the past, in previous years. But you have to, just like the Olympic team, you have to compete for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she's on the heavier weight, but she wrestles both men and women because it's just weight class.
Nice.
So it's amazing to watch her. I would love to have her, like, when she's available, like, on any of my shows, because, man, like, it was just so cool to watch.
That's super badass.
Yeah, she is very, very badass. All right, so The topic for today is dealing with loss. Now, this is a topic that we haven't addressed quite yet because the nature of it does sound pretty heavy. And yet, it seemed to be the most appropriate topic for the end of the year because we've all experienced loss of some sort, whether it's people, relationships, opportunities, jobs. We've experienced a ton of it. Sometimes even losing your own vision. So, I guess to start, I wanted to talk with Sin about sort of like the reason why we ended up talking about this, and I feel like this is probably a relatable way for many of us to start. So, Sin, if you want to go and talk about what you've been experiencing lately.
Yeah. So kind of stumbled upon it actually. It was a little bit inspired by a little bit what Kai was going through and thinking about my own experiences earlier in the year when I had to effectively say goodbye to a character that I've been playing for about 5 years. Spoiler alert, if you've watched LA by Night season 5, that is our final season for LA by Night for that chronicle. There is going to be subsequent chronicles with the rest of the cast, but this was one of the last times that we were going to all play together as these characters, and it was a kind of a do or die situation. So had to walk into the season mostly prepared that I could die, kill off my character. Something even worse could happen because in Kindred World there are worse things that could happen than death. Or survive. So again, spoiler alerts. I'll give you guys a second to mute me if you have not seen LA by Night season 5. I'll give you a second.
So I'm gonna type in the chat spoiler alert for LA by Night season 5, and then I will type again when the spoilers are done.
Yep. So Nellie does survive. Her barony is completely intact. And it's wonderful. But there was a lot of things that I had to endure during that time and almost lost other characters. So it wasn't even just the fact that I might have lost me personally, and I'll go into some of the things that I had to deal with on a personal level. But the fact that the fate of 2 other characters were solely in my hands as well. And that was really tough to deal with. So I'll end those spoiler alerts there too.
Do we end the spoiler alert, or are we good? Or do you want to continue?
Those are the hard spoiler alerts. I'm just gonna kind of dive into some of the coping things that I had to do with Nellie. I spent multitude of therapy sessions. I want to say about 2.5 to 3 weeks leading up into LA by Night because I was nervous as hell. Like I'm on a normal basis, like anxious and nervous at like a level 3. I was at like a 7 before even like stepping into like the studio. It was rough. Like I did all of my coping mechanisms, like my teas, my bracelets, my meditation, everything. And I was like at a 7. Like even our makeup designer, Diana, who's amazing. She even like had all the oils like laid out when I came out. She was like massaging my neck, and she's like, "It's okay, you're gonna be okay." But I had to start really saying goodbye to a character that is a part of me. And the first thing that I decided to do was actually enact one of the tool sets that I got from a therapist a long time ago about dealing with a breakup, because essentially that's kind of what you're doing, is you're dealing with a breakup. And she said that for me, one of the fastest ways to get over a breakup is to actually write that letter that you would never send. So cathartically, I decided to write a letter to Nellie. Explaining all the things that I was proud of her for all the things that she brought and taught me as a person. And I think by the time I got to the end of the letter, I was actually ready to let her go because I understood what value that character had for me and why I felt like I was, what's the word? Lack of better term, I can't think of it. So connected to it because like for a while, like Nellie was just, I felt like that was just like my extended personality, or my persona, my extended self. Like I could really like live inside this character, you know? So trying to disconnect Cynthia Marie with Nellie and understanding the gifts that she gave me, like being able to be a stronger woman and not hide behind a character, is a lot of what she gave me. So being able to write that letter to myself really helped a ton. Actually, it was probably like the biggest catharsis I had, was being able to do that. So recommendation in terms of losing your character or somebody that you've been playing for a long time or even a short time, but that you have this connection with, writing a breakup letter essentially is quite nice. Like writing the things that you've learned from that character, or some of the things that gee, I wish like you would have changed this. Like you can even address it to your character, you know what I mean? Like just to get the emotion out, because really like what's part of grief that I have learned over the last couple of years, sometimes the grief gets trapped inside of you and it starts to compound, and it could take a toll on you physically and mentally. So the best way to get it out, in my perspective, is to write it. So that's kind of where I started with Nellie. So I think by the end, I'm not gonna lie, my last episode, if you watch the last episode of LA by Night, I could even get one word out. I literally said one thing, put my glasses on, and I was crying the entire time on stage. So like my voice cracks, like that's for real. Like that wasn't me trying to act or anything. Like anytime my voice cracked, it was because I was holding back tears and stuff. So about 2.5 months afterwards, I think I finally started to feel okay about essentially giving up Nellie. So yeah, my story from the beginning of the year or mid-year, how I dealt with that grief.
The interesting part about your process, about writing things down, is what I've learned about dealing with difficult things is that if you write things down, the reason why it is so helpful is because usually a lot of these feelings and emotions and thoughts are all indeterminable because they're all in your head. If you kind of list them out or write them down to words, it's almost like transmitting whatever thoughts are, whatever muck is in your head, and actually objectively putting it down so that you can look at it objectively and go, oh, this. And by kind of divorcing yourself from like the whole range of complicated emotions and thoughts and putting them onto a piece of objective paper, you're able to process things easier, which is why that method for like getting over breakups quickly makes a lot of sense, because you could take all of the things that you're assessing of, I feel this way, but I feel this way, but I'm thinking this way. It's like if you put it all down, then you go, oh, I see. So yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Having a conversation about stuff tends to make things easier. There is definitely a point that you'll reach where if you talk about something too much, it's more you're kind of holding yourself back than letting it go. But I think a lot of us are potentially bad at not talking enough about something to have that kind of degree of closure or kind of starting the healing process and stuff.
I often hear people say that the reason why they don't want to open up is because they don't want to burden their own friends.
That is me. That is me all the time.
Which is tough...
No, go ahead. No, you go first. I have a thing that I'm going to say about the word burden, but go for it.
Copy. So it's a tough one, because I completely understand that like sometimes when you hear about other people's anxiety or whatever that they're going through, sometimes it is too much for you. So Ryan, I know we had a conversation about like seeing therapists and stuff like that, but this is a perfect opportunity as to like, I'm going to advocate for somebody to go see a therapist, right? Because if you feel like you're overburdening your friends, chances are maybe you are, and they're not a licensed medical professional that would be able to give you the right information to help cope with it. So I always advocate to go have a therapist, even if like you do it for like a month or something like that. Like at least you get that piece of it out, and then you can keep going on with your life. So
go ahead, Kai.
My observation or semi advice on that area is actually semi to the counter, but I do understand very much the idea of like you should, if you need to lean on your friends, then like that is what friends are for. But at the same time, you should communicate that and definitely have a conversation about it, because the last thing you want to do is like trauma dump on a friend. But when it comes to it, I often, at least my perspective of friendship is that burdens are only things that people do not necessarily want. They're unexpected or unwanted. When it comes to your willingness to help a friend, if you have friends who are close to you, then as someone who cares about their friends greatly, I personally feel that whenever my friends tell me that they're worried about being a burden, I remind them that nothing can be a burden if consent is involved in it. Like if you choose to listen to the person and talk with the person and try and help them through a thing, they're not a licensed professional. They're not as good as a therapist. That's absolutely true. But there is some degree of healing and help that you can get by talking with your friends. I think that's very important. So.
I know that as someone who is often on the, I don't want to say receiving end of burden, because that's not what it is. It's but people do often want to talk to me because they need an ear, a soundboard, for many different things. Also, the whole thing about, as people know, I do have some. I'm empathic. I also have some supernatural abilities in this regard. So it's surreal because often for some of these things I do have answers for them. But I always have to balance that with, is this appropriate information to give to them, because I am not a therapist. But I do need you, but I will help you with at least trying to figure out certain things. I guess the very first thing I would advise to people who are on the listening end of these things is that should you choose through consent to listen to these people, figure out first, are they looking to just vent, or are they seeking a solution? Because those are two totally different things. And sometimes my frustration in trying to resolve other people's problems is because I think they need one and they wanted the other. Also, it is fair if you are a listener to set limits. I have a dear friend of mine who was frustrated and vented, but she went on for an hour, and after a while I felt like crap. So I basically had to make an excuse. I am so sorry, but I have something that I have to handle. Are we okay here? Good. Awesome. Hung up and realized, wow, I ended up taking a bunch of that because she would not stop drilling on that one thing, and it was too much. So if you are on the listening end, and you are not a licensed professional or like someone who is trained in that, it is okay to establish that boundary, because that is, you are doing this as a favor, but it is not your job.
Yeah.
You know?
It's also okay to...
No,
go ahead. I was just going to throw out, it's also okay for you to be in the middle of it and say, you know what, this is too much for me. And respectfully bow out.
Yes.
It's okay to say that.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. You were a person too, and yeah.
And I know that, I think for some of this too, like some of it is, I want to say cultural. Sometimes it depends on your family circumstances, the culture you were raised, the heritage that you come from.
Oh man, white American culture and white English culture as well, at least from my standpoint of things, is very much raised on the idea of like, you don't talk about your problems that much. Yeah. that is definitely something that can be cultural. Like, we don't talk about those things.
Yeah, like among Asian groups, like there's a whole idea of saving face. That is a whole that's a whole thing. Filipinos have this really weird exception to that. I don't know what it is, and maybe it's because we're like just because we're an Asian culture doesn't mean that all the Asian cultures are alike. Um, I think it comes down to you kind of like I think it's a combination of you don't want to be a burden, but at the same time, you still want to rely on your family for things. So if you have to share those things, do share those things, but you don't want to bother like your grandmother with this. Unfortunately, it's like it is a whole thing, or at least within my ethnic culture.
Can I jump in on like a thing that I've been dealing with all year, and it's very related to this, and it's really frustrating for me.
Yes,
when family doesn't share medical freaking history.
What?
Medical history. When families don't share it. Latinos are like the number one for not talking about what is going on with them medically, and then like as a child of Hispanic and something happens, I'm like, oh my God, I'm the first one to experience this. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, and then you start finding out, oh, but that's genetic. And I was like, but I don't understand. Like, no one said anything in the family that they have it. And I go ask around. They're like, oh yeah, it's so-and-so's had it or so-and-so's had it. And I'm like,
oh my goodness. It's like that one show, the revamp of One Day at a Time.
Yes,
they literally dealt with that. They literally showed that on TV. It was
that show was my family. The show was my family.
That is like one of my favorite shows of all time. It is such a great show.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God,
everything that they talk about in terms of, because they talk about Cuban, Puerto Rican is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like right even down to the little details of like the Café Bustillo. Coffee like all over the place, like just the little details is great, but no, how they handle like certain situations, exactly how my family is. So yeah, I just it just happened to me recently, so I'm just very like frustrated about like the non-sharing or the non-communication amongst family, and it all stems from exactly what we're talking about though. You don't want to be a burden on someone. Like a family member was struggling with literally a life-threatening situation, and she didn't want to burden anybody by saying anything about it, so she kept quiet until like it was almost too late. And I was like, if you would have said something sooner, we would have helped you.
I think that's also a cultural thing with how close you are to your family, or not, and how big your family is. I've definitely encountered. I've been in relationships with people with much larger families. I have a very small family. I've been in relationships with people with much bigger families, and it always seems like half the family is against itself and like not acting in a common interest or anything like that. And I see a bit more solidarity in a good group of friends rather than something else. It's kind of that blood is thicker than water sort of line, except for the fact it gets misquoted so often, because it doesn't mean that family is stronger. The full context of the quote actually talks about how the family that you choose to have, the people that you really feel close to, are the ones that are the closest, not your blood. That doesn't mean that your blood can't be possible to do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. Like I want to acknowledge, like within chat, like I see from Eric Jackson, I grew up in the Midwest where men were taught not to show emotion. Yes, gender is also a huge factor.
Toxic masculinity sucks.
Yeah, my dad was also the epitome of that. And I am aware that a lot of it had to do with the fact that as a brown man who moved to the U.S. and had to be as hard as everyone else in Oakland, that's and went into the military and came out with a certain perspective, that makes sense. Like, I get that. And then Amanda V mentioned God, that mood. Half of it is one, a lot of my Mexican side is insured, and two, culture, which is also an economic thing that we're also dealing with. So a lot of what we deal with, and sometimes in our burden, like we're always so afraid that by sharing our burden, it will cost other people like their opinions of us. It'll cost other people money or resources that they could be using to someone else. Like there is so much fear about what that burden will cost other people, that it does impact us because we feel like it is wrong to share our burdens in that way.
Mm-hmm. I have absolutely felt that way on a lot of different things. There's a lot of times I'm getting better at catching myself with it, but it still doesn't stop it from just kind of happening as a default. It's kind of like muscle memory at this time, at least for some of us. And yeah, I just find myself kind of like not trying to seek out advice from others or talk to others about anything. I just kind of let myself fall into something and just kind of see how it goes, kind of go with the flow. That kind of passivity can be really dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of a common thing to sort of encounter in loss too.
Kai, have you dealt with loss recently that you feel that you could talk about?
Yeah, so I'm going to put the hat that I was like slowly doing some hand stitching on down. This is kind of a real tricky one to go into because I got a lot of mixed feelings on a lot of stuff. I mentioned that I was doing a shout out to the community of the LARP that I run. Fairly recently, I had to make a public announcement, and it was absolutely terrifying doing so. But not for the reasons that people might necessarily think. I had to admit to the community that attends my game that I needed to step down from running it, that I needed to find ideally a team of people to take over for me. And I wanted to basically like sell the chapter to make sure all of the digital and physical assets and everything like that get handed over. And I mean, if you're a listener and you've been listening to this podcast for a length of time, you'll know that we're all very strong advocates of, kind of game being less important than the real people. People are more important than game, to put it more accurately, and that people matter, and you can't really enjoy a safe environment unless you actually in real life physically feel safe and emotionally too. All of that kind of teaching that I kind of helped steer, because I don't at all feel like I was the only person kind of encouraging and nurturing that in our community. I just tried to create a place where people knew my expectations, and it was really down to whether others would do that with us as well. And it created a wonderful kind of like growing environment for all of that to flourish. But I had to basically test that in kind of one of the potentially worst sort of ways, the equivalent of kind of staring down the barrel of what I have helped create and see if it actually, how it reacts when I might be putting it at risk. Because me saying that I want to step down and I'm trying to find a seller, at the time, I could really see the potential for people to be feeling threatened by that, to feel like I'm quitting on them, that I had betrayed them or something like that. When in reality, I just had kind of not been following my own rule, not been following the teaching of people are more important than game. So I had to, kind of admit that publicly to our community and sort of ask for the understanding, and people blew me away. It's not that I didn't expect it. It was that I feared it. Like I feared a bad response. And fears are sometimes not very rational. But the amount of positivity and outpouring that people kind of gave and the understanding, it was, I struggle to describe exactly how it is, but it's this kind of feeling of like I'd been pushing so hard on so many facets of how I was trying to run the game, that, as I said, I wasn't paying attention to my own needs or my own life as much, and that was really causing me to suffer in points. And with everyone being so supportive, it almost made me kind of like reflexively be like, oh, I care about you so much, and this is so validating for how things are working, that it immediately made me feel like I wanted to jump right back in and recommit to everything. And obviously, when I'm admitting to the community that I don't feel like I'm in a good mental health place, to actually do any of that, to be a responsible business runner, or really like prioritize people over game, as the case may be, when I'm not doing it for myself. I think that makes sense, right? Like there is that kind of reflexive element of like it's your baby, your creation, you helped build it up, and then that last sort of moment when you have to try and step away and let it fly on its own, and then you see it flying, you want to jump out there and essentially fly with it. And I had to kind of slap myself and stop myself from doing that. Just because I don't want to step down from it, but I needed to. I still need to, and I think it's very likely that we're going to be able to find some people to take over. Obviously, I can't discuss any details of how far along that is or anything like that, but I think it's very likely we're going to be able to do that. And I think the weirdest part on all of that loss element is I actually don't know how much I talked about the thing that really kind of twisted the knife in it for me, that is really the cause that's burnt me out on running the LARP, running an event. I took a really big business gamble when I first started running the game, and I decided to try and kind of back it with enough finance to, in essence, kind of treat it like a blockbuster kind of budget LARP, but ran monthly. And my hope, because I'll be frank, Dystopia Rising in some areas of America doesn't have a great reputation. There are definitely some things that have happened with the network because it is a network. And I mean, with both of my co-hosts, they are veterans of the vampire networks, and those are riddled with controversy at times. Dystopia Rising being a network, it has its skeletons in its closets, and I decided to try and run a chapter for a few different reasons. One being I love the system, I love the world, and I love the people that were playing it, but also I wanted to really kind of try and push the change on the inside. Not that every chapter is bad or anything like that. I'm not trying to make any indication of that, but I knew that the best way to try and have a successful chapter in Northern California was to try and make it as visually exciting and impressive as possible, and also back up my speech, like back up that people are more important than game, and make that a real focus on it. And that was the momentum that we were building was really strong. Like in terms of LARP growth, we became like a 120 person LARP very quickly. And hell, because it was part of the network, our opening game was 220 people, which is madness. But at the end of the 12th game, after we had locked up, and after we had managed to basically a local tank museum had brought a tank to the event, and we kind of that was arranged, and it was an amazing game. And the bad guys lost, all of the fascists lost, and everyone won. And as everyone's kind of going off to afters and stuff, and we're locking up the venue, an arsonist snuck onto the site that had nothing to do with us and burned down a building. And then we had a protracted 2-month-long hiatus while the local city council continued to apply rule stipulations after stipulations on how we could and couldn't use the venue, and ended up just basically completely shutting us out of it. And my original intent when I created the chapter was to bust my ass on a big game for a year, and then, you know, kind of look at the money, look at the investment sort of thing, and kind of maybe take a few steps back on how much was going in every game, and just kind of see how that would help grow it. And losing the venue right at the end of that absolutely gutted me, and it messed me up in a very, very bad way. Taking that big gamble and then seeing it just quite literally go up in flames, it fucked me up. And I didn't have any time to really process that before I was back on the frantic chasing after trying to find a new venue. And then to kind of mimic Bo Burnham in his comedy special, the funniest thing happened when I actually managed to get a new venue to use. We immediately had to cancel the use of that venue because COVID was declared. And we have these amazing opportunities. We have like a great amount of like costume department that I've built up with all of those investments that I've made and everything like that. And we have the potential for some amazing venues that are going to save us a lot of money. Like, in terms of the chapter, I don't think we are stronger now than we've... let me rephrase that. I think we are stronger now than we have ever been, yet I do not have the drive or the passion, and I don't feel like I can go forward with that. And that's kind of me realizing that I wasn't excited about these opportunities to build up the game and continue building on this thing. That was me realizing that I burnt myself out that badly. And that was I don't think you can be the captain of this ship anymore. You need to find a new crew that can kind of take over. I know that that's a hell of a lot of things to kind of say. I've been speaking for like 10 minutes here, but...
First of all, you were only speaking for 5.
Oh, good.
Also, you were very succinct and eloquent in what you said.
Well, that's a first.
No, it's not. You're always eloquent and succinct.
Oh my god, I am not succinct. I definitely do not think I am succinct, and I will guarantee that most of my players on opening announcements would also agree that I am not succinct. I might be very passionate, maybe eloquent. I'm not succinct.
Well,
But thank you for the compliment.
I would like to say I'm very proud of you for opening up and being able to talk about that. That's not easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that a lot of LARPs kind of forget is the top staff that run the game are so often proper leaders, or aspire to be. They try to be. And when I say leadership, I talk very much of like the Martin Luther King idealism of leadership, where to lead involves sacrificing yourself. It involves putting others before you and acting on their behalf. To lead, to be a true leader, is to actually be more of a servant than a lord or anything like that. And so a lot of LARP runners kind of slip into this area where they are kind of burning so many ends of their candle at once. I don't know how they manage to burn more than 2 ends, but trust me when I say that I've definitely burned more than 2 ends of a candle at one time. And I feel like quite a lot of LARP runners would agree on that. Asking your community to acknowledge that you're a person and that you can't necessarily keep going is kind of a terrifying thing. And there's a lot of LARP runners who get forgotten about or mistreated, or will get mistreated by their players because they're doing something or making a rules clarification that people don't agree with. LARP runners, I think, are some of the most, in terms of like LARP running in general, some of the most underappreciated people around. that's not me saying that I deserve to be appreciated, but I do feel that if you care about your LARP runners, try to tell them that, because you will absolutely make their day. Yeah, if you really care about your LARP runners, see if you can get them a Starbucks, or if they need something, like offer to like help out a little or something, because they are people and they do care, and they notice when you're nice to them like that.
Sort of like a. I guess I wanted to say something to an effect about like just being nice. Oh, we see a hydrate.
We got a hydrate now, by the way.
When did that become a thing?
Oh, it's been a thing for like a few months now.
Clearly, I have missed this. Go on.
Please continue.
So when you said caring about your LARP runners, like, it could always be like a combination of, you know, telling them thank you, just expressing things, like offering to help when you can, like not going. Well, okay, sorry. Like, so what I wanted to say was last game, last Twin Mask. One of the biggest things that I felt like was probably one of the most fun things was, so John Bassett, who runs Twin Mask, plays a character named Lord Master Gabriel, and I fell into some plot where like he is slowly going mad, and so I played a character, Sicario, and his solution was, well, if you think too much, our solution is to get you very, very wasted and just have a time where you are not thinking about anything. So we're going to go to this bar and we're going to get you wasted. And I just kind of thought, okay, this is just kind of like a fun thing to just say. And I just like brought in like a few of our friends or a few different characters to just come in and I just basically talked about how cool this was going to be. And I asked John out of character, so he said, you know, like, are you available like at 2 a.m? And he goes, you know, I'll try to be there at 2 a.m, you know, for that role play. Now, it's very possible, because he's running a LARP, that he will not be there. It turned out that he showed up at 1:30 because he really, really wanted to role play this. And I didn't know until like other people said, hey, Archduke, he's out there early. I'm like, wait, what? So I was not prepared to get him wasted early, but he was like, he really loved the idea, and we proceeded to get him wasted, and it was some amazing role play, which also got everyone else in the group wasted. We got into some really, really silly role play, and I think one of the reasons why I enjoyed it was because, you know, John is a LARP runner, but he never gets scenes like that are just all about him and him doing silly antics, because he's often doing things that are related to plot, and he's always thinking about, let's do all of these things. He's always calculating whatever has to happen based off of other actions. It's like, nope, this is just you and your character and us getting drunk with you and seeing what happens. And it's one of those, I just really, really enjoyed that. And he said it was his favorite thing that entire weekend.
That kind of stuff is cathartic. Honestly, the best kind of wakes, just in reality, like in anything really, in stories, in books, in movies, and in real life, in LARP too. When you start to kind of regale and go back and talk about the good times, that helps so much. Yeah, I actually I really wanted to go to a gathering that NorCal was having as a Christmas thing, and unfortunately I wasn't able to make it, and I'm pretty upset that I wasn't able to quite manage that, but I'm very much hoping that I can try and get up there sooner rather than later, and actually just, have some time of hanging out and regaling with some folks and stuff. That just feels healthy,
We are coming to the top of the hour, and I just want to quickly ask the group, what's one tip that you can say can help somebody whenever someone or yourself experiences loss, whether it's a little tactic, a little thought, even a little saying. What's one method that you can do to alleviate yourself when you are feeling that way? I'm going to start with Sin.
One thing that helps alleviate feeling the grief, that what I'm catching.
Yeah.
So I actually will use a pretty good example. Just real quick, I had another character bite the dust not too long ago, and we did a funeral for her. And I hadn't been able to actually process my emotion with losing that character as well. So as a quick aside, I sat at my own funeral dressed as a different character in a tent and kind of listened to what everybody was saying. And one thing that helped was, Ryan, actually having you sitting next to me. And when I was sobbing, you kind of rubbed my back, and that's kind of a mechanism that actually makes me feel a lot better. Now I'd say I don't consent to everybody rubbing my back, because that's freaking weird. And no.
Yeah, but it's because we're close. It's like we can do that.
People who know my anxiety tics know that is one of my things to make me feel better. However, again, I do not condone that everybody gets to come up and rub my back. And if that is a tactic for you, do not consent unless you feel comfortable with somebody rubbing your back. That being said, it made me cry harder, but it also helped me to hurry up and get it out. So I think one of mine is just a nice physical touch on the arm, the back, just knowing that somebody's there waiting for me to come out of it.
Kai.
Furthermore, evidence that Sin is actually a cat. Am I wrong?
I mean, listen. When we designed the dice for her, it's a cat die. It's a cat die icon.
Yep.
That's why it's a cat with a crown.
I definitely feel like we have more episodes that we have done on when we're streaming on Twitch for our show where Sin has cat is than not. In fact.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I think I need to rectify that problem by getting cat ears for these.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not really sure on good advice for things. You know yourself better than most people. Allowing yourself to actually do something. Wallowing and sitting still does not help. Ignoring the problem and just trying to pretend it's not a thing. I was doing that for a very long time, and it got so bad that the thing that I loved stopped being the thing that I loved. It doesn't mean that I don't love the people involved in it, but I understood that I could no longer keep captaining this ship that I helped build every fucking plank of, or not every plank of, but you get the idea. That ship is something that I saw built in front of me, and I worked really hard to be a part of that, and then having to not have it as something that is a part of you or a part of your identity or a part of your joy or something. It leaves a hole. And if you try to pretend that hole isn't there, you're not going to be able to fill it or heal or anything like that. However, what kind of analogies you like for it, but pretending that something isn't a problem doesn't work in the past because survivor bias is absolutely a thing. And it doesn't work today. It is 2021, almost 22, and we're allowed to talk about our feelings, and we're allowed to share them with the people that we're around, and we're allowed to process them, and we're allowed to say that strength is vulnerability, not a weakness.
For me, this is a lesson that I've had to learn, and again. It's a hard one lesson, and that is usually when I feel something wrong, my first tendency is to logic myself to go, everything is fine. This will, what you're feeling now is only temporary. This will be resolved tomorrow. Someone just has to communicate with you. And I start going down the things of logical reasons why I should be fine. But that leads me to a spiral where I feel like I'm not feeling fine. But logically, I should be okay. But I'm not feeling okay. What is wrong? And I have learned the hard way, you cannot logic yourself out of a bad feeling to a satisfactory degree. So what you have to do is you have to accept, I feel bad. You have to actually say, I feel bad, admit that you feel bad, and do something that is completely selfish. Like I go to my vice, I don't care if anyone thinks this is bad, I'm going to get a pint of ice cream and eat it. That sounds really weird, but sometimes you actually have to have the tantrum, follow through. Once you do it, you'll have this much regret, but you are no longer thinking about the problem, and then you can deal with it. It's a big thing that people don't often realize, because people, sometimes when they try to console you, they might tell you, these are the logical reasons why you should not feel bad. When sometimes they'll say, don't cry. I now have to rephrase it. Instead of saying, don't cry, I now ask them what's wrong. Sometimes we say don't cry because we are afraid of unleashing whatever burden there is or making things inconvenient. But you don't want to tell people that they're a burden or inconvenience. So we just ask what's wrong. And if they're be able to share, they can share. But don't tell them, don't feel this way, don't cry, because it just alienates you from the person who is feeling those emotions.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of sterilization in the quote-unquote professional environment. And I've seen that professional environment start to bleed over into the norm for everything. It doesn't have to be that way. Put yourself around people who can be around you,
And if you are feeling yourself that way, I've done this in meetings, and some people thought Ryan was being really emotional, and you know what? Fuck them. Sometimes I just walk out, because after I walk out for 5 minutes and I come back, I'm good. But there have been meetings where they're like, Ryan's just too emotional. It's like, listen, I would rather walk out than unleash the fury I'm about to unleash on you, or cry a lot in front of you and make you really uncomfortable. In either case, I'm doing this for me, so that you get my best me, and not the me that's in that awkward meeting. So, in other words, sometimes you just kind of have to remove yourself from a situation. Sometimes, like when you're writing a bunch of stuff and you're stuck in writer's block, you go away and you come back and you get the idea. Same thing with feelings.
Yeah.
You give yourself a break.
There are some really good studies about the idea of like inspiration and having a muse and things like that. Like creativity comes in waves. As things kind of ebb and flow, letting that process kind of happen allows you to move on from it. If you are suffering from writer's block, the first thing that you should start doing is stop writing.
Stop writing. Yep.
And go and I love the phrase. I don't know if it's actually necessarily a positive or just a negative, but I love the phrase "go touch grass," because just go out and do something, be something else, chase something, butterflies, ice cream, whatever. Existing is better than just wallowing.
My brain went to a place where you said "go touch grass." Probably not appropriate.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. On that note, we've come to the conclusion of this episode. That is a weird segue, but we're gonna own it because it's the end of the year and it's us. What I love about this new format is that this is more, in a strange way, this is more us. Not that we haven't presented us, but this really is what we're like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I really want to take a brief segue and kind of call Ryan out for just a moment when he was talking about that show that I actually don't recognize the show that Sin and Ryan were talking about as like one of their favorite TV shows, because I thought Golden Girls was Ryan's favorite show.
Oh yeah, Golden Girls is my jam, is my main favorite show, but it doesn't mean I don't have other favorite shows.
Oh.
Like I would say it's probably with One Day at a Time is probably within my top 5 because it's a series I could watch repeatedly and still be entertained.
I think I've watched it like 6 times already.